The dust-laden horizon swallowed the last ember of daylight as Teresa Ellison stumbled through the rugged terrain outside Rock Springs, Wyoming, her once pristine blue dress now torn and mudded, much like the reputation she'd left behind in town. Tears streamed down her face, carving paths through the dirt on her cheeks, as the weight of her banishment crushed her spirit more heavily than the bundle of hastily gathered possessions she carried. The year was 1882, and Rock Springs was booming with the promise of coal, the railroad, and opportunity. Teresa had arrived 6 months prior, taking a position as a schoolteacher after the passing of her father. At 22, she'd hoped to forge a life of her own, away from the painful memories that haunted her back east. Now, those hopes lay shattered at her feet, swept away by the harsh winds of injustice and the power of privileged men. She hadn't meant to uncover the ledger. It had been a simple mishap while organizing the school board's records, a leather-bound book that fell open to reveal discrepancies in the town's educational funds. Money meant for books, repairs, and teacher salaries had been diverted to Mayor Harmon's private enterprises. When she'd brought her concerns to the board meeting that evening, she'd been met with cold stares and venomous accusations. Thief, they'd called her. Liar, they'd shouted. Within hours, her reputation had been destroyed. By morning, she'd been dismissed from her position and ordered to leave town by nightfall. The distant howl of a coyote startled Teresa from her thoughts. Darkness had fallen completely now, and the realization of her predicament struck her with terrifying clarity. She was alone in the wilderness, with nowhere to go and night closing in. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto a flat rock, her sobs echoing across the empty landscape. "Madam, are you all right?" The deep voice caused Teresa to gasp and scramble to her feet. Through her tears, she made out the silhouette of a man atop a horse, his broad-shouldered frame backlit by the rising moon. "Stay back," she warned, her voice quavering as she fumbled for the small Derringer pistol her father had insisted she carry. The man dismounted with fluid grace, keeping a respectful distance. "I mean no harm, madam. I'm just heading back to my ranch when I heard crying." As he stepped closer, the moonlight revealed a face weathered by sun and wind, yet kind, with piercing eyes that reflected genuine concern. He was tall, dressed in the practical garb of a working cattleman, denim trousers, a faded cotton shirt, and a worn leather vest. A dusty Stetson sat atop hair the color of dark walnut. "My name's Vincent Calloway," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Most folks call me Vince." Teresa hesitated, the Derringer still clutched in her trembling hand. "Teresa Ellison," she finally replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent nodded toward the small pistol. "That's a sensible precaution for a lady alone, but I assure you it's unnecessary. What brings you out here after dark? It's dangerous country for anyone, especially a woman on her own." The simple kindness in his voice broke the fragile composure Teresa had been desperately maintaining. Fresh tears spilled over as the events of the day came rushing back. "They forced me out," she said, the words catching in her throat. "I found discrepancies in the school board's financial records, money missing. When I questioned it at the meeting, Mayor Harmon accused me of stealing from the school fund myself. No one would listen to me. They gave me until sundown to leave town." Vincent's expression darkened. "Harmon, you say?" "Robert Harmon," Teresa nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "That man's had his fingers in every dishonest pie in the county for years," Vincent said, his jaw tightening. "Few have the courage to stand against him." "I didn't stand against anyone," Teresa protested. "I only spoke the truth about what I found." A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's lips. Sometimes the truth is the most dangerous thing you can speak in places where lies are the foundation. He glanced at her small bundle of possessions, then back at her tear-streaked face. Well, Miss Ellison, truth is welcome at the Triple C Ranch. I've got a spare room in my house where you can stay until you sort out your next steps. Teresa stared at him incredulously. You would take in a stranger, a woman accused of theft. I'm taking in someone who had the courage to speak truth to power, Vincent corrected, extending his hand. And in my experience, those who cry over injustice rather than profit from it are rarely the dishonest ones. Teresa hesitated, weighing her desperate situation against the risk of trusting a stranger. But something in Vincent Calloway's steady gaze told her she could trust him. With a deep breath, she tucked away her derringer and accepted his outstretched hand. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. Vince, he corrected, helping her gather her belongings. Let's get you somewhere safe. Brandy here is a steady mount, he added, patting his horse's neck. She can carry us both back to the ranch. With practiced ease, Vincent mounted the mare and reached down to help Teresa up behind him. As she settled against his back, arms hesitantly encircling his waist, Teresa felt the first flicker of hope since her world had collapsed hours earlier. Hold tight, Vincent instructed, and with a gentle click of his tongue, Brandy set off at a steady pace through the moonlit landscape. They rode in silence for several miles, the rhythmic gait of the horse and the vast canopy of stars overhead gradually calming Teresa's frayed nerves. Vincent's back was solid and warm against her, a reassuring presence in the unfamiliar darkness. It's not much farther, he said over his shoulder, breaking the silence. The ranch house isn't grand, but it's solid. My sister Caroline used to say it was too big for just one person, so I reckon you'll be doing me a favor, filling up some of that empty space for a while. Your sister isn't with you anymore, Teresa asked cautiously. Vincent was quiet for a moment before answering. She married a banker from Cheyenne 3 years ago. They moved east to Boston last spring. There was a note of pride in his voice, but also loneliness. The trail curved around a stand of cottonwoods, and suddenly, the Triple C Ranch appeared before them, a sprawling property nestled in a protected valley. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of sturdy logs, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and in the distance, Teresa could make out the silhouettes of corrals and a large barn. As they approached, a dog's bark cut through the night air, followed by the appearance of a lantern on the porch. A figure emerged from the house, the light revealing an older man with a shock of white hair. "You're back late, boss," the man called out. "Was beginning to wonder if I should saddle up and come looking for you." "Sorry to worry you, Henry," Vincent replied as he reined Brandy to a stop. "Had a detour. This is Miss Teresa Ellison. She's going to be staying with us for a while." Henry's weathered face betrayed no surprise as he nodded a greeting. "Madam, welcome to the Triple C, already the guest room." "Henry Ford's been with me since I inherited this place from my uncle," Vincent explained as he dismounted and reached up to help Teresa down. "Best foreman in Wyoming territory, and a fair hand in the kitchen besides." Teresa stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground, her legs stiff from the ride and the emotional exhaustion of the day catching up with her. Vincent caught her elbow, steadying her with a gentle touch. "Easy there," he murmured. "You're safe now." Those simple words, "you're safe now," nearly undid her completely. Teresa bit her lip to hold back a fresh wave of tears as she followed Vincent onto the porch and into the warmth of his home. The interior of the ranch house surprised her. Though unmistakably masculine in its furnishings, it was clean and comfortably appointed, with a large stone fireplace dominating the main room. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that suggested a mind more curious than the average cattleman's. "The kitchen's through there," Vincent said, pointing. "And upstairs are the bedrooms. Henry will have yours ready shortly. Are you hungry?" Teresa started to shake her head, then realized she hadn't eaten since morning. "Perhaps a little," she admitted. "Let me see what we can rustle up." Vincent moved toward the kitchen, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "It won't be fancy, but it'll fill the hollow." As he disappeared into the kitchen, Teresa stood uncertainly in the middle of the room, her bundle clutched to her chest. The events of the day felt surreal now, as if she'd stepped from one life into another without warning. The ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner marked the passing moments as she tried to make sense of her drastically altered circumstances. Henry appeared at the top of the stairs. "Room's ready, Miss Ellison. Second door on the right. There's fresh water in the pitcher and I've laid out some towels." "Thank you, Mr. Ford," Teresa replied, gathering her skirts to ascend the stairs. "Just Henry, madam. Everyone calls me Henry." The guest room was simply furnished but comfortable, with a brass bed covered in a colorful quilt, a small writing desk by the window, and a washstand with a porcelain basin. A kerosene lamp cast a soft glow over the space. Teresa set down her bundle and crossed to the window, drawing back the curtain to gaze out at the moonlit landscape. From this vantage point, she could see the full extent of the Triple C Ranch, far larger than she'd initially realized, with vast pastures stretching toward distant hills. It was beautiful in a rugged, untamed way that spoke to something deep within her. A light knock at the door startled her from her contemplation. "Miss Ellison." "I've brought some supper," Vincent called from the hallway. Teresa opened the door to find him holding a tray with a bowl of fragrant stew, a chunk of bread, and a mug of what smelled like coffee. "I thought you might prefer to eat up here tonight," he explained, offering the tray. "You've had a trying day." "That's very thoughtful, thank you." Teresa accepted the tray, suddenly acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. "Mr. Calloway, Vince, I don't know how to thank you for your kindness to a stranger." A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "No need for thanks. Get some rest, Miss Ellison." Things often look different in the morning light. As Vincent turned to leave, Teresa called after him, "Teresa, please call me Teresa." He paused, glancing back with a nod. "Sleep well, Teresa. You're safe here." After he departed, Teresa sat at the small desk to eat. The stew was simple but delicious, rich with chunks of beef and vegetables. The bread was slightly stale but satisfying when dipped in the savory broth. As she ate, the tension that had held her rigid throughout the ordeal began to ease, replaced by bone-deep weariness. Setting aside the empty bowl, Teresa moved to the washstand and poured water into the basin. She scrubbed her face and hands, then changed into her nightgown, one of the few garments she'd managed to pack before being forced out of her boarding house. As she slipped between the cool sheets of the bed, Teresa's thoughts drifted to Vincent Calloway. There was something compelling about the rancher, a quiet strength and integrity that had been notably absent in the men she'd encountered in Rock Springs. His offer of shelter had been made without hesitation or apparent ulterior motive, a kindness she hadn't expected to find after the day's betrayals. Sleep claimed her quickly, her exhausted body surrendering to the comfort of the bed, and the knowledge that, at least for tonight, she was safe from the cruelty that had driven her from town. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sounds of ranch life already in full swing. Teresa woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her spare dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days. After tidying her hair as best she could without her brushes and pins, most of which had been left behind, Teresa made her way downstairs. The aroma of coffee and bacon guided her to the kitchen, where she found Henry at the stove and Vincent seated at a large oak table, a newspaper spread before him. "Good morning," Teresa said hesitantly from the doorway. Both men looked up, Henry nodding a greeting while Vincent immediately rose from his chair. "Good morning, Teresa. I hope you slept well. Better than I expected to, thank you." Vincent gestured to the table. "Please join us for breakfast. Henry makes the best flapjacks this side of the Mississippi." As Teresa took a seat, Henry placed a steaming plate before her: golden flapjacks, crisp bacon, and eggs fried just firm enough. Her stomach growled appreciatively at the sight. "This looks wonderful, Henry. Thank you." The older man harumphed softly, a hint of pleasure in his gruff expression. "Eat while it's hot. Coffee." At her nod, he poured a cup from the pot on the stove and set it beside her plate. Vincent folded his newspaper and set it aside, his attention fully on Teresa. "I thought I might ride into town today, speak with some people about what happened." Teresa's fork paused midway to her mouth. "You needn't trouble yourself on my account, Vince. Mayor Harmon has considerable influence in Rock Springs." "All the more reason to get to the bottom of this," Vincent replied, his jaw set in a determined line. "If he's embezzling school funds, that affects every child in the community." Teresa set down her fork, her appetite suddenly diminished. "He'll deny everything. It will be my word against his, and he's made sure no one will believe me." "Perhaps, but I have some standing in these parts. My family's been ranching this land for 2 generations. People know me. No, I don't involve myself in matters unless they warrant attention." "Why would you risk your reputation for me?" Teresa asked softly. "You don't know me." Vincent's eyes, the color of a summer sky, met hers directly. "I know enough. I know you had the courage to speak truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. I respect that." A warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee spread through Teresa's chest at his words. "Besides," Vincent continued, "the Triple C does business with merchants in Rock Springs. If corruption is taking root there, it affects us all. Best to address it now before it spreads further." Henry set a fresh pot of coffee on the table. "Boss has always had a strong sense of what's right. Gets him in trouble sometimes, but folks respect him for it." Vincent chuckled. "Henry makes it sound grander than it is." "I just can't abide bullies and thieves, especially when they hide behind positions of authority." He rose from the table, reaching for his hat. "I'll be back before sundown. Henry will be around if you need anything." As Vincent strode from the kitchen, Teresa felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. His willingness to champion her cause was both touching and concerning. She didn't want to bring trouble to this man who had shown her such kindness. "Don't you worry," Henry said, seeming to read her thoughts. "The boss can handle himself, and he's got friends in high places these days. His cousin married the territorial judge's daughter last spring." Teresa sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "How long have you known him, Henry?" "Since he was knee-high to a grasshopper," the foreman replied, settling into Vincent's vacated chair with a cup of his own. "Worked for his uncle first, then stayed on when Vince inherited the place 10 years ago. He was just 20 then, barely more than a boy, but he learned quick and worked harder than any man I've known. He seems different from most men I've encountered in the West." Henry snorted softly. "That he is. His mama was an educated woman, taught him to read and think for himself. Sent him back east to school for a few years before she passed. He came back with books and ideas, but never lost touch with the land or the work it takes to run a ranch this size." Teresa found herself hungry for more information about the enigmatic rancher. "Has he never married?" A shadow crossed Henry's weathered face. There was a girl about 5 years back, Margaret Wilson, daughter of a banker in Cheyenne. They were engaged to be married. He paused, staring into his coffee. Influenza took her the winter before the wedding, hit the town hard that year. Vince was never the same after. "I'm so sorry," Teresa murmured, her heart aching for the loss Vincent must have endured. He threw himself into expanding the ranch after that, bought more land, increased the herd. Triple C is one of the most successful operations in the territory now. Henry drained his cup and stood. But there's an emptiness in him that cattle and land can't fill. The older man collected their plates, effectively ending the conversation. "Feel free to explore the house and yard, Miss Ellison. Just don't wander too far alone. We've had reports of mountain lions in the area." Left to her own devices, Teresa spent the morning exploring the ranch house. The more she saw, the more intrigued she became by its owner. Vincent's study was particularly revealing shelves lined with books on philosophy, history, and literature, alongside practical volumes on cattle breeding and land management. A framed daguerreotype on his desk showed a handsome couple, the woman bearing a striking resemblance to Vincent, suggesting these were his parents. By midday, restlessness drove Teresa outdoors. The spring air was crisp but pleasant, the sun warming her face as she walked the path toward the barn. The ranch was a hive of activity, with cowboys moving cattle in a distant pasture and workers repairing a section of fence near the corral. A young woman with copper-colored hair emerged from the barn, leading a dappled mare. She spotted Teresa and changed direction, approaching with an open, curious expression. "You must be Miss Ellison," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Molly Jenkins. I help with the horses and do some cooking when the men are out on the range." Teresa shook the offered hand, surprised by the firm grip. "Please call me Teresa. Do you live here at the ranch?" Molly nodded. "In the small cabin behind the bunkhouse. My pa was the previous foreman before he passed. Mr. Calloway kept me on, said I had a way with the horses that was too valuable to lose." Pride colored her voice. "Not many outfits would employ a woman for such work, but the Triple C isn't like most ranches." "So I'm beginning to understand," Teresa replied. "Vincent seems to be a man of unusual principles." A knowing smile crossed Molly's face. "That he is. Most decent man I've ever known, and I've known plenty who weren't." She patted the mare's neck. "Would you like to meet Ruby? She's the gentlest in our string, perfect for a lady rider." Teresa hesitantly approached the horse, who regarded her with liquid brown eyes. "She's beautiful. I haven't ridden since I was a girl, though. It's like they say you never really forget. I could saddle her up for you if you'd like to try. Just around the corral to start." The idea was appealing. After the confines of her teaching position and boarding house in Rock Springs, the freedom of riding across the open range called to something wild within Teresa's spirit. "I'd like that very much, thank you." Within half an hour, Teresa found herself atop Ruby, circling the corral under Molly's watchful guidance. The initial nervousness quickly gave way to exhilaration as muscle memory returned, her body remembering how to move with the horse's gait. "You're a natural," Molly called encouragingly. "A few more days' practice, and you'll be ready to ride the trails." Teresa laughed, the sound surprising her when had she last laughed with such genuine joy. "I'd forgotten how wonderful this feels." They continued until Teresa's muscles began to protest the unaccustomed exercise. As Molly helped her dismount, Teresa caught sight of a rider approaching from the direction of Rock Springs. Even at a distance, she recognized Vincent's broad-shouldered silhouette and the distinctive markings of his horse. "He's back early," Molly observed, following Teresa's gaze. "Must have been an interesting trip to town." A knot formed in Teresa's stomach as she wondered what news Vincent brought. Had her reputation been further maligned? Had he discovered evidence against the mayor, or found his own standing diminished by association with her? Vincent spotted them as he drew closer, raising a hand in greeting. He dismounted with fluid grace, his expression unreadable as he approached. "You look at home on horseback," he commented to Teresa, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Molly was kind enough to reacquaint me with the saddle," Teresa replied, "though I fear I'll be feeling it in my muscles tomorrow." Vincent nodded to the younger woman. "Thanks for showing her around, Molly. Would you mind taking Brandy to the barn? I need to speak with Miss Ellison." As Molly led both horses away, Teresa clasped her hands tightly, bracing for bad news. "What did you learn in town?" Vincent gestured toward a bench beneath a large cottonwood tree. "Let's sit." Once settled, he removed his hat, running a hand through hair damp with sweat from the ride. "You were right about Mayor Harmon's influence. Most folks were reluctant to discuss the matter openly." Teresa's heart sank. "I'm sorry you wasted your time." "I didn't say it was a wasted trip," Vincent corrected. "I spoke with Dr. Miller. He's treated Harmon's wife for years and has no love for the man. According to him, several town council members have been questioning Harmon's financial management privately." "Really?" Hope flickered in Teresa's chest. "But they said nothing when I raised my concerns." "Fear is a powerful silencer," Vincent replied grimly. "But your accusations have stirred things up. Miller says there's talk of requesting a territorial audit of the town's finances." Teresa's eyes widened. "That would reveal everything." "Exactly. I also visited your former landlady, Mrs. Preston. She's holding your belongings for you. Said she never believed the accusations but couldn't stand against the mayor." "She was always kind to me," Teresa murmured. "I'm glad to know she didn't believe the worst." Vincent hesitated before continuing. "There's more. I met with Judge Thurman, who's in town for the spring circuit court. He's an old friend of my family and a man of impeccable integrity. Once I explained the situation, he agreed to review any evidence you might have noted from the ledgers." Teresa straightened, hope surging. "I kept detailed notes of the discrepancies. They're hidden in a compartment of my traveling trunk at Mrs. Preston's." "Good girl," Vincent said approvingly. "I can return to town tomorrow to retrieve them." "I should go with you," Teresa insisted. "They're my notes, my testimony." Vincent frowned. "It might not be safe for you in Rock Springs just yet." "I can't hide forever," Teresa countered, lifting her chin. "If I'm to clear my name, I need to stand behind my accusations." For a long moment, Vincent studied her, admiration gradually replacing concern in his expression. "You're a remarkably brave woman, Teresa Ellison." The warmth of his gaze sent a flutter through her stomach that had nothing to do with their conversation. "Not brave," she demurred, "just stubborn about the truth." A smile creased the corners of Vincent's eyes. "In my experience, standing for truth in a world comfortable with lies takes more courage than facing down a charging bull." He rose, offering his hand to help her up. "We'll ride to town together tomorrow. For now, let's see what Henry's prepared for dinner. I'm starved after that ride." As they walked toward the house, Vincent's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, a gesture both protective and oddly intimate. Teresa found herself intensely aware of his proximity, of the subtle scent of leather and sun-warmed skin that surrounded him. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me when no one else would." Vincent glanced down at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "Some people's worth is evident from the first moment you meet them, Teresa. You just have to know how to look." Dinner that evening was a lively affair, with Henry producing a roast that rivaled any Teresa had tasted in the finest homes back east. Several of the ranch hands joined them at the long table. their initial wariness toward the newcomer giving way to friendly conversation as the meal progressed. Teresa found herself drawn into discussions about everything from cattle prices to territorial politics. Her opinions received with interest, rather than the dismissive tolerance she'd often encountered in Rock Springs. Here, it seemed, she was valued for her mind rather than merely tolerated as a woman of genteel background. Vincent sat at the head of the table, occasionally steering the conversation away from topics that might make her uncomfortable, but otherwise allowing her to hold her own among his men. The respect they showed him was evident in every interaction, not born of fear but of genuine regard. As coffee and apple pie were served, one of the older cowboys, a grizzled man called Clem, raised his cup in Teresa's direction. "Miss Ellison, heard you stood up to that snake Harmon." "'Bout time someone called him to account." Teresa blushed at the unexpected praise. "I merely pointed out inconsistencies in the financial records." "Takes guts to do that," another hand, younger and missing 2 fingers on his left hand, added. "My boy's in that school. If Harmon's stealing from the education fund, he's stealing from my kid's future." Several others murmured agreement, and Teresa realized with a start that her actions, which had seemed so isolated and ultimately futile in Rock Springs, had ripples extending far beyond herself. These working men, with their calloused hands and weather-beaten faces, understood the injustice on a personal level. Vincent caught her eye from across the table, his expression saying clearly, "See, you're not alone in this." Later, as the men filed out to the bunkhouse and Henry cleared the dishes, Vincent invited Teresa to join him on the porch. The night was clear, the vast Wyoming sky ablaze with stars. "Your men seem like good people," Teresa observed, settling onto a wooden rocking chair. Vincent leaned against the porch railing, his profile strong in the lamplight spilling from the window. "Best crew I could ask for. Most have been with me for years." "They respect you a great deal." "Respect goes both ways on the Triple C," Vincent replied. "I expect honest work, but I also pay fair wages and treat my men like the valuable partners they are, not disposable labor." Teresa rocked gently, considering this. "That philosophy seems to extend to your treatment of women as well." Molly mentioned how unusual it is for a ranch to employ a woman for work with the horses. Vincent chuckled softly. "Molly Jenkins can gentle a wild Mustang faster than any man I've ever seen. Would be foolish to lose that skill just because she wears skirts." He glanced at Teresa. "My mother taught me to judge people by their character and abilities, not their gender or background. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was." A hint of sadness colored his voice. "Died when I was 16, pneumonia. My father followed 3 years later, thrown from a horse during a thunderstorm." "I'm sorry," Teresa said softly. "I lost my father last year. My mother passed when I was young." Vincent nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Orphans, both of us. Perhaps that's why we recognize something in each other." The observation struck Teresa as profoundly true. There was a kinship between them that transcended their brief acquaintance, a sense of recognition that had been present from their first meeting. "Henry mentioned there was someone special in your life once," Teresa ventured carefully. "A fiancée." Vincent stiffened slightly, then sighed. "Margaret, yes, she was the daughter of a banking associate of my cousin. Beautiful, refined. We were to be married 5 years ago." His voice grew distant. "The influenza took her, along with her mother and younger brother. It was a brutal winter." "I'm so sorry, Vince." He shook his head as if to dispel painful memories. "Life in the West is harsh. We all carry our losses." His gaze returned to her, softening. "What about you? No suitor back east?" Teresa's hands stilled on the arms of the rocker. There was someone, a professor at the ladies' seminary where I taught after finishing my education. We were close. I believed he intended to propose. The familiar ache of betrayal tightened her chest. Then I discovered he was already married with a wife in Boston. Ah, Vincent said softly, understanding immediately. Hence your journey west. I couldn't stay, not with the whispers and pitying glances. My father had just died, leaving me a small inheritance. It seemed the perfect opportunity to start fresh in a place where no one knew my shame. There was no shame in being deceived by a dishonorable man, Vincent said firmly. Teresa smiled sadly. Society rarely makes that distinction for women, I'm afraid. They fell silent for a time, the distant howl of coyotes and the soft creaking of the rocking chair the only sounds. Teresa found the quiet companionable rather than awkward, a rare experience with a man. We should turn in, Vincent finally said. Dawn comes early on a ranch, and we have a ride to town ahead of us tomorrow. As they rose to enter the house, Teresa impulsively placed a hand on Vincent's arm. Thank you for listening, for not judging. In the lamplight, his eyes were impossibly blue as they met hers. Truth is always welcome here, Teresa, even the painful kind. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. Then Vincent stepped back slightly, breaking the tension. Good night, he said softly. Sleep well. Good night, Vince. As Teresa climbed the stairs to her room, she found herself dwelling on the comfort she'd found in Vincent's presence, a sense of safety and understanding she'd never expected to discover in the rugged Wyoming territory, least of all with a man she'd known for barely 24 hours. The journey to Rock Springs the following morning was undertaken in comfortable conversation, with Vincent pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the area's history. Teresa, dressed in her best remaining outfit, a navy blue traveling suit with modest lace at the collar, felt a growing nervousness as the town came into view. Stay close to me, Vincent instructed as they approached the main street. Remember, you've done nothing wrong. Rock Springs was bustling with its usual mid-morning activity, freight wagons delivering goods to businesses, miners heading to or from their shifts, ladies conducting their shopping. Heads turned as Vincent and Teresa rode past, whispers following in their wake. They stopped first at Mrs. Preston's boarding house, where the elderly landlady greeted Teresa with a tearful embrace. "Oh, my dear, what they did to you was shameful," she exclaimed, ushering them inside. "I've kept your room just as you left it. That dreadful mayor told me to dispose of your things, but I knew the truth would come out eventually." Teresa's room was indeed untouched, her trunk still positioned at the foot of the bed. With Vincent standing guard at the door, she quickly retrieved her notebook from its hiding place, along with several personal items she'd been forced to leave behind. "That's everything," she said, tucking the notebook safely into her reticule. "Where do we meet Judge Thurman?" "His temporary chambers are at the courthouse," Vincent replied. "He's expecting us at 11. As they stepped back onto the street, a burly man in an expensive suit intercepted them, his florid face contorted with anger. "Calloway, what's the meaning of this?" "That woman was ordered to leave town." Vincent placed himself slightly in front of Teresa, his posture relaxed but alert. "Mayor Harmon, good morning to you too. Miss Ellison is here at my invitation and with the knowledge of Judge Thurman." Mayor Robert Harmon's face purpled further at the mention of the judge. "Whatever lies she's told you are documented in detail," Vincent interrupted smoothly, "including dates, amounts, and account numbers from the school board's financial ledgers. Most interesting reading." A flash of fear crossed Harmon's features before he masked it with bluster. "Preposterous! The woman is delusional, trying to cover for her own thievery." A serious accusation, a new voice interjected, which I understand is supported by no evidence whatsoever. All heads turned to see an imposing figure approaching a tall, silver-haired man in a black frock coat, his bearing unmistakably that of a man accustomed to authority. Judge Thurman, Vincent acknowledged with a respectful nod. Mayor Harmon was just expressing his concerns about Miss Ellison's presence. So I heard. The judge's piercing gaze swept over the mayor, who seemed to shrink slightly under the scrutiny. My chambers, gentlemen and lady, now, this is not a matter for public spectacle. The judge's temporary quarters in the courthouse were austere but formal, with a large desk dominating the space. Once the door closed behind them, Thurman took his seat, gesturing for the others to do likewise. Now then, he began, steepling his fingers, I understand there are serious allegations of financial impropriety involving the Rock Spring School Board funds. Miss Ellison, please present your evidence. With steady hands, Teresa withdrew her notebook and opened it to the relevant pages. As the school's teacher, I was asked to assist in organizing the board's records during inventory. That's when I noticed discrepancies between the recorded donations from local businesses and the actual funds being allocated to school expenses. She passed the notebook to the judge, who examined it with careful attention. You've documented specific transactions, I see. Yes, Your Honor. The entries in red show where money was reportedly received but never appeared in the expenditure records. The blue notations indicate unusual withdrawals that had no corresponding school-related expenses. Judge Thurman looked up at Mayor Harmon, whose complexion had shifted from angry red to ashen. These are very specific allegations, Mayor. What is your response? Harmon tugged at his collar. Fabrications, complete fabrications. Then you won't object to a full audit of the town's accounts, the judge replied, particularly those related to educational funding. That is, there are procedures. Indeed there are, Thurman agreed, which is why I've taken the liberty of telegraphing the territorial governor's office for an independent auditor. They should arrive by week's end. Harmon half rose from his chair. You have no authority to. I have every authority, Thurman cut him off sharply, especially when presented with credible evidence of misappropriation of public funds. Sit down, Robert. The use of his first name seemed to deflate Harmon further. He sank back into his seat, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. In the meantime, the judge continued, turning back to Teresa, the accusations against you, Miss Ellison, appear to be without foundation. You are, of course, free to return to your position in Rock Springs if you wish. Vincent leaned forward slightly. Judge Thurman, given the circumstances and the hostility Miss Ellison has faced, I've offered her sanctuary at the Triple C Ranch until this matter is fully resolved. The judge nodded thoughtfully. A prudent arrangement. Mayor Harmon, you will ensure that Miss Ellison's reputation is publicly restored. A retraction of the theft accusations should appear in the next edition of the Rock Springs Register. Is that understood? Harmon's jaw worked silently for a moment before he managed a curt nod. Excellent. The judge rose, signaling the meeting's end. I'll see you all when the auditor arrives. Good day. Outside the courthouse, Teresa drew her first full breath since entering the building. I can't believe it happened so quickly. Vincent guided her toward where their horses were tethered. Judge Thurman doesn't waste time with formalities when justice is at stake. It's why he's respected throughout the territory. And feared by men like Harmon, Teresa observed, as he should be. Vincent helped her mount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. You were magnificent in there. Clear, factual, unshakable. Teresa felt a flush of pride at his praise. I simply presented the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, especially when powerful people prefer lies. Vincent swung up onto his own horse. Let's head back to the ranch. I think this calls for a celebration dinner. As they rode out of town, Teresa was acutely aware of the stares following them, some curious, others resentful, and a few that seemed almost admiring. The weight of public opinion had crushed her spirit days earlier, but now, with Vincent riding beside her and the truth finally emerging, she felt buoyant with vindication. "Penny for your thoughts," Vincent said as they left the town limits behind. Teresa smiled, turning her face to the warm spring sunshine. "I was just thinking that sometimes the path forward appears when we least expect it. 3 days ago, I thought my life was in ruins. Now, Vincent prompted when she trailed off. Now I feel as though possibilities are opening before me, doors I never knew existed." Vincent's expression softened as he regarded her. "The West is a land of possibilities, Teresa, for those brave enough to seize them." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the connection that had formed so swiftly yet felt as natural as breathing. Teresa looked away first, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "Race you to that stand of cottonwoods," she challenged impulsively, needing to break the intensity of the moment. Vincent's laugh rang out across the open range as they spurred their horses forward, racing side by side across the Wyoming landscape, the future stretching before them as vast and promising as the endless blue sky overhead. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to both Rock Springs and Teresa's life. The auditor arrived as promised and uncovered extensive financial misconduct by Mayor Harmon and 2 council members. All 3 were removed from office and faced criminal charges, their fall from power sending shockwaves through the community. Teresa, fully exonerated, was offered her teaching position back with a formal apology and increased salary. After careful consideration, she accepted, though she continued to stay at the CCC Ranch, riding into town each day to teach. "The children need stability now more than ever," she explained to Vincent one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. "With all the upheaval in town, the school should be a place of consistency for them." Vincent nodded, admiration evident in his expression. "They're fortunate to have you. I've heard nothing but praise for your teaching from the hands whose children attend." Teresa smiled, pleased by his words. "I've begun organizing a fund for new books and building repairs. Several businesses have already pledged support." "Add the CCC to that list," Vincent said. "Education is the foundation of progress, even in cattle country." During these weeks, their relationship had evolved into a comfortable friendship, with shared meals, long conversations, and occasional rides across the ranch's vast acreage. Teresa found herself increasingly drawn to Vincent's quiet strength, his unwavering principles, and the gentle consideration he showed to everyone from his most experienced ranch hand to the youngest child of his workers. For his part, Vincent seemed to brighten in Teresa's presence, the shadow of past loss gradually receding from his eyes. Henry remarked on it one morning as they watched Vincent showing Teresa how to rope a fence post from horseback, her delighted laughter carrying across the yard when she finally succeeded. "Haven't seen the boss smile like that in years," the foreman observed. "You're good for him, Miss Ellison." Teresa flushed, uncertain how to respond. "He's been very kind to me." Henry gave her a knowing look. "It's more than kindness, I reckon, though he might not realize it himself yet." The older man's words stayed with Teresa throughout the day, echoing in her mind as she taught her students and later as she rode back to the ranch in the golden light of late afternoon. Was there truth in what Henry suggested? Did Vincent feel the same inexplicable draw that she experienced whenever they were together? Her contemplation was interrupted when she arrived at the ranch to find unusual activity around the main house, several horses she didn't recognize tethered near the porch, and the sound of unfamiliar voices drifting from inside. Molly appeared from the barn, hurrying to take Ruby's reins. "You've got visitors, Miss Ellison. Arrived about an hour ago, asking for you specifically." "For me?" Teresa dismounted, puzzled. Who would? Her question died on her lips as the front door opened and a distinguished-looking couple emerged onto the porch. The woman, elegantly dressed in a traveling suit of deep burgundy, raised a gloved hand in greeting. "Teresa, there you are, my dear." Recognition struck like lightning. "Mrs. Montgomery, Dr. Montgomery." The couple trustees of the ladies' seminary, where Teresa had taught in Pennsylvania, descended the porch steps to greet her warmly. "We've been searching for you for months," Eliza Montgomery explained, clasping Teresa's hands. "When we learned what Professor Winters had done his deception about his marital status, we were horrified. By the time we discovered the truth, you had already departed without leaving a forwarding address." Teresa stood frozen, her past and present colliding in the most unexpected manner. "How did you find me?" Dr. George Montgomery, a dignified man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, answered. "We hired a Pinkerton detective. It took some time, but he eventually traced you to Rock Springs. When we arrived there, we heard the most extraordinary tale about your courage in exposing corruption. Mr. Calloway was kind enough to invite us to wait for you here." As if summoned by his name, Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral as he observed the reunion. Teresa caught his eye briefly, trying to convey her confusion and surprise. "Please, come inside," she said to the Montgomerys, suddenly acutely aware of her dusty riding habit and wind-blown hair. "I'm sure we have much to discuss." In the parlor, over tea served by an unusually formal Henry, the Montgomerys explained their mission. The seminary's reputation suffered greatly when Professor Winters' deception came to light, Mrs. Montgomery said. Several other inappropriate relationships were subsequently discovered. The board took immediate action, dismissing those involved and implementing new policies. "What my wife is working toward," Dr. Montgomery interjected with a gentle smile, "is that we've come to offer you a position, Teresa. Head of the English department with full autonomy over curriculum development. Your departure left a void that no one has adequately filled." Teresa set down her teacup with an unsteady hand. I'm honored by your offer, truly, but my life has taken a different direction now." "We understand you've been through an ordeal here," Mrs. Montgomery pressed, "and that you've shown remarkable courage. But surely a return to civilization, to a position of respect and security, would be preferable to." Her gaze swept the rustic surroundings, her meaning clear. Vincent, who had been silent until now, spoke from where he stood by the fireplace. "Wyoming may lack certain refinements, Mrs. Montgomery, but I assure you Miss Ellison is held in the highest respect here. Her position at the school is secure, and her contributions to the community are deeply valued." A tension filled the room, unspoken currents flowing between Vincent and the visitors. Teresa found herself torn between gratitude for the unexpected opportunity and an inexplicable reluctance to consider leaving Wyoming, leaving the Triple C Ranch, leaving Vincent. "Perhaps we're overwhelming you with this sudden proposal," Dr. Montgomery said, ever the diplomat. "We'll be staying in Rock Springs for several days. Take some time to consider our offer, Teresa. We can discuss details when you've had a chance to reflect." After the Montgomerys departed for town, promising to call on Teresa at the school the following day, an awkward silence descended on the ranch house. Vincent excused himself to attend to ranch business, his manner more distant than it had been in weeks. Teresa retreated to her room, her mind in turmoil. The offer from the seminary represented everything she had worked toward in her education and early career: prestige, security, intellectual engagement. Yet the thought of leaving Wyoming, of leaving the life she had begun to build here, created a hollow ache in her chest. When she descended for dinner, she found only Henry in the kitchen. "Boss said he had business to attend to in the north pasture," the foreman explained, not quite meeting her eyes. "Said not to wait dinner on him." Teresa's appetite vanished. "I see." Henry busied himself with the stove for a moment before turning to face her directly. "Miss Ellison, it ain't my place to speak on personal matters, but I've known that boy since he was young. He's got his father's pride and his mother's stubborn streak." "What are you trying to tell me, Henry?" The older man sighed. "Just that sometimes people who have lost too much are afraid to reach for happiness when it's standing right in front of them. They figure it's safer not to hope than to hope and be disappointed." Teresa sank into a chair, understanding dawning. "He thinks I'm going to accept the position and leave." "Ain't for me to say what he thinks," Henry replied, returning to his cooking. "But a man doesn't avoid a woman he's indifferent to." After a mostly silent dinner with Henry, Teresa made a decision. Changing into her riding habit, she sought out Molly, who was checking on a pregnant mare in the barn. "I need to find Vincent," Teresa explained. "Which way is the north pasture?" Molly looked up from her task, concern evident in her expression. "It's a fair ride, Miss Ellison, and the sun will be setting soon." "Please, Molly, it's important." Something in Teresa's tone must have convinced the younger woman. "Take the trail behind the barn, follow it to the creek, then head west along the water. You'll see the north pasture after about 2 miles. The boss usually checks the line shack up there when he's avoiding people." Teresa raised an eyebrow at the frank assessment. "Sorry, miss," Molly said with a small smile, "but everybody knows that's where he goes when he's got thinking to do." "Been up there a lot since you arrived, actually." This revelation gave Teresa pause, but she pressed on with her plan. "Could you saddle Ruby for me, and perhaps a lantern in case it grows dark before I return?" 15 minutes later, Teresa was riding along the creek, following Molly's directions. The setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, the beauty of the Wyoming wilderness once again striking her with its rugged majesty. This land had become dear to her in ways she hadn't anticipated when she'd first arrived in the territory. The north pasture opened before her, as promised, a sweeping expanse bounded by distant hills. A small structure the line shack Molly had mentioned stood on a slight rise, smoke curling from its chimney. Teresa urged Ruby toward it, her heart pounding with nervousness and determination. As she approached, the door opened and Vincent emerged, rifle in hand, clearly alerted by the sound of hoofbeats. His expression shifted from wariness to surprise when he recognized his visitor. "Teresa, what are you doing out here alone? It's nearly dark." She dismounted, tethering Ruby to a post before turning to face him. "You disappeared." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I had work to do." Work that couldn't wait until after dinner, work that became urgent immediately after the Montgomerys' visit, Teresa challenged, stepping closer. "Or are you avoiding me?" "You have an important decision to make," Vincent replied, his tone carefully neutral. "I didn't want to influence you by hiding in a line shack miles from the house." Teresa shook her head in frustration. "That's not giving me space to think, Vince." "That's running away." His eyes flashed. "I'm not running." "Aren't you?" She moved closer still, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled emotion in his eyes. "Why don't you want to influence my decision? What are you afraid I'll hear if you speak your mind?" Vincent looked away, his profile strong against the sunset sky. "The seminary position is perfect for you, Teresa. A chance to use your education, to be respected for your intellect. You'd be a fool to turn it down for this." He gestured vaguely at the surrounding wilderness. "For this," Teresa repeated softly. "Or for you," his gaze snapped back to her, surprise evident in his expression. "Because that's the real question, isn't it?" Teresa continued, her voice gaining strength. "Not whether I prefer civilization to Wyoming, but whether what's growing between us is worth exploring." Vincent's throat worked as he swallowed hard. "I have nothing to offer that compares to what the Montgomerys are promising." "I didn't ask for a comparison of offers," Teresa said, taking a final step that brought her within arm's reach of him. "I asked what you want, Vincent Calloway." The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Then, just as Teresa began to fear she had misread everything, Vincent's composure cracked. "I want you to stay," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "God help me, I've wanted it since the night I found you crying in the darkness. You brought light back into my life, Teresa." The thought of losing that light again. Teresa reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his weather-roughened cheek. "Then ask me to stay." Vincent's hand covered hers, holding it against his skin as if it were something infinitely precious. "Stay," he whispered. "Not for the school or the town or even for Wyoming. Stay for me, Teresa, because I think I'm falling in love with you and I'm terrified it's happening too fast for you to feel the same." Joy bloomed in Teresa's chest, warm and bright as the setting sun. "It's not too fast," she assured him. "Not when you recognize something true and right and meant to be." Vincent's free arm slid around her waist, drawing her closer. "And is that what we are? Meant to be?" "I believe we are," Teresa answered, her gaze holding his. "Truth is welcome here, you said that first night." "Well, here's my truth. I'm falling in love with you too, Vincent Calloway. I'm not going anywhere." The last barrier between them dissolved as Vincent lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that spoke of hope reborn and promises yet to be made. Teresa's arms wound around his neck as she returned the kiss with equal fervor, pouring all the certainty of her decision into the embrace. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, the first stars had appeared in the deepening twilight. "We should head back before it's fully dark," Vincent said, though he made no move to release her from his arms. Teresa laughed softly. "I brought a lantern. I came prepared." Vincent's answering laugh was filled with wonder. "Of course you did, my practical, determined Teresa." His expression grew serious. "Are you certain about the seminary position? It's a remarkable opportunity." "There will be other opportunities," Teresa replied, "but there's only one CCC ranch and only one Vincent Calloway." He kissed her again, briefly but tenderly. "I promise you won't regret your decision. We'll build something extraordinary together, Teresa, something true and lasting." As they rode back to the ranch, side by side in the gathering darkness with only the lantern's glow to light their way, Teresa felt a profound sense of rightness settle in her soul. The path forward was clear now, illuminated not by the lantern she carried, but by the love that had blossomed between them in the most unexpected of circumstances. The following day, Teresa met with the Montgomerys at the Rock Springs School, where she graciously declined their offer. To her surprise, they received her decision with understanding. "Love is not a force to be dismissed lightly," Mrs. Montgomery said, with a knowing glance toward Dr. Montgomery. "We eloped, you know, against my father's wishes, 43 years ago, and I've never regretted a day." "Mr. Calloway seems a man of substance and principle," Dr. Montgomery added. "Different from the typical Western rancher, I must say." Teresa smiled. "He defies categorization in the most wonderful ways." Before departing, the Montgomerys made an unexpected proposal of their own, a partnership between the seminary and the Rock Springs School, with Teresa serving as a remote curriculum advisor. The arrangement would allow her to contribute to educational advancement while remaining in Wyoming. "The frontier needs progressive education as much as the East," Mrs. Montgomery explained. "Perhaps more so. With your experience in both worlds, you're uniquely positioned to bridge that gap." Teresa accepted enthusiastically, already envisioning the possibilities for her students and the community. When she shared the news with Vincent that evening, his pride was evident. "They recognized what I've known all along," he said, drawing her close. "That your intellect and passion for education are exceptional gifts, too valuable to be confined by geography." Spring gave way to summer, and as the Wyoming landscape exploded with wildflowers, Teresa and Vincent's relationship deepened into a love that neither had dared hope to find again. They were married on a perfect July day beneath the cottonwood tree where they had shared so many conversations, Judge Thurman officiating with evident pleasure. The entire ranch turned out for the celebration, along with most of Rock Springs. Even Mayor Harmon's replacement, a reformed banker named Peterson, attended with his family. The Montgomerys had sent a generous wedding gift, a complete set of classic literature for the school, with a note expressing their continued support for Teresa's educational initiatives. As the newlyweds shared their first dance under a canopy of stars, Vincent gazed down at his bride with undisguised adoration. "Happy Mrs. Calloway," he murmured. Teresa's heart swelled with joy at her new name. "Completely Mr. Calloway." "I never thought I'd find this again," Vincent confessed, his voice low. "After Margaret, I believed that part of my life was over. And I never imagined finding such acceptance after my disgrace in Pennsylvania," Teresa replied. "Yet here we are, both given second chances we didn't expect." Vincent's arm tightened around her waist as they swayed to the fiddle music. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up about those ledgers? If you'd stayed quiet to protect your position?" Teresa shook her head. "I couldn't have lived with myself. Truth has always mattered too much to me." "Then we owe our happiness to your courage," Vincent said, brushing a kiss against her temple. "And to Mayor Harmon's corruption, oddly enough. Perhaps we owe it to that moment when you found me crying and said truth was welcome here," Teresa suggested. "That's when everything changed." Vincent smiled, the memory clear in his eyes. "I meant those words. I just never imagined how completely they would transform both our lives." As they continued dancing under the vast Wyoming sky, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, Teresa reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. From the devastation of being cast out for speaking truth, to the joy of finding a love that embraced and celebrated that same quality, her life had taken a turn she could never have predicted, but now couldn't imagine living without. The years that followed brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Teresa continued teaching while implementing innovative educational approaches that garnered attention throughout the territory. Her collaboration with the Montgomery Seminary led to exchange programs that brought Eastern teachers west for experience and sent promising frontier students east for advanced education. Vincent expanded the triple CTCS operations, implementing sustainable ranching practices that many neighboring outfits initially scoffed at, but eventually came to respect and imitate. His reputation for fairness and integrity grew, leading to his appointment to various territorial committees focused on land use and water rights. Their first child, a son they named William after Vincent's father, arrived in the spring of 1884, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. The children grew up surrounded by books and horses, equally at home in the schoolroom, and on the open range perfect embodiments of the union between their parents' seemingly disparate worlds. As Rock Springs grew into a significant town, Teresa and Vincent remained central figures in its development, advocating for education, fair labor practices, and honest government. The corruption that had once nearly destroyed Teresa's life became a distant memory as new leadership, guided by the lessons of that scandal, steered the community toward prosperity. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Teresa with a special gift: the deed to 10 acres adjacent to the school, designated for the construction of a proper town library. "You once told me that education is the foundation of progress," he reminded her as they stood on the site together. "This library will ensure that foundation extends to every citizen of Rock Springs, regardless of age or background." Teresa, overwhelmed by the gesture, could only embrace him, words failing to express her gratitude and love. "I never imagined this life," she confessed later that evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. "When I came west, I was seeking escape, not fulfillment." Vincent took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in the familiar gesture that still sent warmth through her after all these years. "And I never imagined finding someone who would challenge me, support me, and love me as completely as you have. Even when I'm stubborn," Teresa teased. "Especially then," Vincent replied with a laugh. "Your stubbornness about truth is what brought you into my life, remember." As the sun set over the Triple C Ranch, painting the Wyoming sky in spectacular hues of orange and purple, Teresa leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, contentment washing over her. From the moment of crisis that had driven her from Rock Springs to the life of purpose and love she now enjoyed, her journey had been guided by an unwavering commitment to truth, and by the extraordinary man who had found her at her lowest moment and offered not just shelter, but understanding. "Truth is welcome here," Vincent had said that night. And in that simple statement, Teresa had found not just a temporary refuge, but a home, a family, and a love that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.